My name is Aaron Edwards with Santos Springs. Today is October 31st, 2025, last day of October, and welcome to this week's edition of the Friday Field Report, South America. We have a lot to cover, a few spoilers in case you weren't watching last week. We'll get to the numbers in just a little bit, but two things. Planting in Brazil was delayed, and in order for them to have that optimal window on whether they can get their double crop corn in or not, the rounded number that I use is, will they be 30% planted by the end of October? Now, I know there's a lot more nuance to that based on the region, but that's a good rounded number to use. So we'll have an answer to that question. Will they or will they not get there? And are they or are they not delayed? But before we jump into that, I want to just talk a little bit about the weather in South America. So let me go ahead and share the screen there. Okay, and let me grab a marker. Let's see what will show up. I think red will work nicely. So something that I always talk about, but if you take the total South American production and you cut it off right around this mark, right around here, if you cut it off right around there, now that's a ballpark, under that red line is roughly south of all of the South American production, which would be Argentina, Paraguay, central and the southern part of central Brazil and all of southern Brazil. So approximately that line, south of that line is roughly half of the South American production, and north is also roughly half. So I want to point out a couple of regions with that in mind. And for this chart, for this map, what we're looking at is the past precipitation in inches over the last 7 days. So accumulated rainfall. This state right here of Mato Grosso, a lot of this is redundant if you follow weekly. That's roughly a third of Brazil's soybeans are produced within that state. Then these four states that come together here, that's that northeast expansion region, Mato Piba, and other states that also are big producers. This is Goiás, and over here is Mato Grosso do Sul, which is kind of a transitional state. It's like southern it's Mato Grosso do Sul, just like we have North Carolina, South Carolina. So we'll talk more about that region on the next image. But what stands out really quickly here is two things over the last week. Dryness in that northeast expansion area, Mato Piba. Dryness in this area is known, which is actually, there's a river that runs through here. That's known as the Vale do Araguaia, but it's eastern Mato Grosso and parts of Goiás. And there's dryness. And I was talking to farmers down there this week, and basically, spoiler alert, because we'll talk about what's forecasted, but he said planting was stopped. They're kind of nervous, chomping at the bit, and waiting for the forecast to get back into the field. Now let's transition kind of below that red line, and let's talk about the southern part of South America. And you can actually see, let me grab the marker here. Let's do red again. Okay, we still got red. You can kind of see that the top of this map kind of basically cuts off about where that line was that I drew on the other map. So over here we have Argentina and its provinces. Right in here we have Paraguay. This is the southern part of Mato Grosso do Sul. This is the state of Paraná. And then here is the state of Rio Grande do Sul. So this area, this is all Brazil here. Brazil, Brazil, Brazil. Paraguay, and then this over here is Argentina. Also pretty much widespread rains over the last 7 days. So pretty good rainfall last week in southern Brazil. There might be some spots in Argentina that are on the dry side, but also in southern Brazil, quite a few regions with decent rainfall. Like I'm looking at these 4 and 5 inches right in here. That's decent rainfall. So tale of two production regions. Northern Brazil, the western 2/3 of it are fine. The eastern part of that, central and northern Brazil, the eastern part is on the dry side as of last week. And then the southern part of all of South America production region, It's pretty good with rainfall, maybe some spots in Argentina, and a little bit too much rainfall in Rio Grande do Sul. Now we're going to look into those. I've talked a little bit about the geography and what happened to the weather. Now we're going to look at the map so we can kind of pencil into Brazil what's going on in some of those regions from a planting percentage number. And we'll switch this over to blue. So these 12 states represent 96% of Brazil's soybean production. Brazil does have a first crop corn or a summer corn crop, but it's only about 15 to 20% of their total corn production. The big corn crop is double crop after soybeans. So our real focus now is on soybeans because that impacts not only soybeans, but also their planting window for double crop corn. So the first thing we want to talk about is these top 4 states. That's that northeastern expansion region. And we just now saw on the map that over the last week that has been dry. That's the first thing. Having said that, the state of Bahia is actually ahead of pace, which if you have rain forecasted and you want to plant in the dust, you know, the old saying, if you plant in the dust, your bins will bust. These 2 states, Piauí and Maranhão, they are on the dry side, but historically they're a little bit behind planting, but like in Piauí, historically they're at 2% planting, and this year they're at 1% planting. Or in Maranhão, historically they're that's a little bit behind, the 3 percentage points, but that's not as alarming. The bigger story, and I'll actually switch here to, let's do yellow here. The bigger story is if we look at, for example, Mato Grosso, that's still on blue, we'll go to yellow. The state of Mato Grosso over here is, that's not looking good. All right, let's just do it. Let's put 0 in here. 10 percentage points behind Mato Grosso do Sul. 10 percentage points behind Goiás. Gosh, that's what? 18 percentage points behind? 12 percentage points behind? São Paulo is about 10 percentage points behind. Paraná is 3. That's not too bad. Rio Grande do Sul is early to be planting, but this is the heartland of Brazil production. I mean, this is like your I states being 10 to 20% delayed on planting. That is a significant story. Even though planting is delayed, there's really 2 questions that come to mind. Okay, planting delays, will that affect yield? Maybe it's more than 2 questions. Will it affect yield? Number 2, will it affect planting double crop corn? And number 3, can they still get a crop in? Will it affect acreage? So will it affect acreage? Will it affect yield? Will it affect double crop corn? Let's start with double crop corn. Remember I had said by the end of October, they should hit that 30% mark. As of the 25th, they were already at 34.4% planted. I have not talked to anybody, north to south, that expects a reduction in double crop corn acres because of planting. There are concerns about soybean planting, but I have not talked to anybody that is expecting a reduction in double crop corn acres because of planting, at least not yet. So that leaves us with 2 questions. Will the soybeans get in, number 1, and will there be an adjustment to acreage, and will there be an adjustment to yield? One thing that you have to understand about the Brazilian production region is the window is it really goes from, and this varies because it's north to south, but they have a long window that they can plant in and still raise good soybeans crops. So from roughly middle of September, October would be for many the optimal window, and you could see there behind that most historically we would be at 40% planted by now. So really October and November, that's when a lot of it goes in. But they still have all of November before they're really facing delays, because in order to raise a double crop corn in like the Cerrado region, you have to raise soybeans, and then you harvest the soybeans basically in the mud, and you plant the corn, with rains, just as you can get the field work done. And then you have to have enough rainfall to basically get you through pollination in order to have a decent shot at a yield on double crop corn. So you can forego, you can be late. You can potentially raise very good soybeans, even planting them into December. Now that's not ideal. That's not what they want. But can you plant 70% of Brazil's crop in November? Yeah. So I don't really expect a reduction to acreage unless it's a pricing story. I really can't make ends meet and I'm not going to plant, but I don't really expect a reduction to acreage. So the next thing is reduction to yield. And there's actually maybe a little bit of it probably actually smooths yield out some, not necessarily bigger or smaller, but they've been delayed in October, but they got enough to get their double crop corn in. Now there's dry, there's wet, there's all sorts of different combinations, and planting is spread out over a larger window. So it probably, instead of having a lumpy crop all coming in at once at harvest, it probably actually smooths out their harvest and their planting and their yield and their operations. Probably smooths that out to some extent. There might be a story where they didn't quite get as many soybeans planted, so there's a little bit of demand at the beginning of the year that the U.S. could potentially meet, but I feel like it's early to get to that conclusion. Still a lot of weeks to follow. Now that we talked about planting progress, let's talk about forecasted rains. So this is actually the European model that I'm using. They were both similar this week, but I felt like the European one was maybe a little friendlier on the rain, so I wanted to show that one. This is the area. Remember last week, this was very dry. This was very dry, and this was very dry. So this whole region was a major concern region, and really most of the concerning region is getting rainfall. This northern part, that even though I highlighted it, most of the production would be really kind of following this rain. So there might be some spots of dryness in here. I've seen some reports. Some of those people have irrigation. There's always a story, but if it's a story that affects 3% of the acres and it's not that bad, I mean, it probably doesn't change the overall yield. Generally speaking, for November, if you look at monthly forecasts, there is a bit of a concern in this area. Let's get the marker. There's a bit of a concern in this area here. It didn't show up as well. Let's maybe do yellow. There's a bit of a concern in that area as far as less rain than typical is forecasted. So there it'll really become a distribution issue. If you can get less rain than usual, especially up in the rainforest, so to speak, it's not quite the rainforest, but they usually get almost too much rain. So you can go light on the rain as long as it's spaced out throughout the month of November. So that's definitely a region that we need to just keep checking back into week in and week out, because if that rain is lumpy and then you go 15 days, 20 days without rain, there can absolutely be a yield story or a replant story. And if what's planted in the dust and the rain doesn't come, and then there's replant, then there's delays. So there could still be a bullish story. I'm just not on the weather. With the rain forecasted this week, I'm not ready to stick my neck out there and say it's bullish just yet. And then also, as we look at the forecast, most of the southern part of the production area, so Paraná, Rio Grande do Sul, Paraguay, Argentina, maybe not as much rain as they would like, but they're coming off of a week of good rains, and most of them are going to get another drink again this week, and some of them are going to get plenty of rain. So for this week, not a ton of a bullish story. They needed some rains. They got some rains. Planting got over that 30% hurdle in Brazil. Now we'll just we'll keep a close eye on it. Touch in next week. That's why it's the weekly report. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend and ready for a next week of challenging markets next week. Be safe.